Hello, once again, Minister Hill, part three, talking about reaping whatsoever you sow. Whatsoever, listen to the word you sow. That very same thing that you sow, you're going to reap. You sow lemons, you're not going to reap grapes. Huh? All the bad and evil you do is coming up again. You may not be repaid in this life, but believe me, my friend, you'll get it in hell. So I left off talking about Saul. Saul hated Christians. He was going into their house, binding them and casting them into prison. And then he went to the high priest on his way to making this journey near Damascus to desire letters of the high priest that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them and bind them unto Jerusalem. Then as he was traveling, the light of God shined round about him from heaven. God had enough of Saul's evil ways because there was a calling on his life. There's not a calling on your life. God will let you continue in your evil way and doing what you're doing, and you'll get it in hell. But Paul was predestined to preach to the Gentiles. So, in God's timing, he shined a light on Paul, and Paul fell to the earth. Then he began to call on the name of the Lord. Who else is he going to call on? When the 18 wheelers land on top of you on the highway, who else are you going to call on? And God heard Paul, and his name was changed from Saul to Paul, and God put blindness on him until he went on a street called Straight in the house of Judas, so that a man named Ananias would put his hand on him that he might receive his sight. And I like that song by Lee Williams, He Laid His Hands on Me. Acts, the ninth chapter, verse 1 through verse 12. You can read about Paul's conversion. Then God spoke to Ananias in verse 16. For I will show him how great things he will suffer for my name's sake. Once again, on my other message, I was talking about the wickedness of people. But when you live right, huh? When you live right, the godly must, you can't get around it, suffer persecution. And here, Jesus is saying Paul is going to suffer for my name's sake. Now that old wicked Saul was converted, Paul, a new creature now in the Lord. But he had to reap, even though he was a new creature, what he had sown as a sinner. Salvation does not do away with the evil that one sows. But after you are converted, now you will have a comforter as a Christian, the Holy Spirit to comfort you, opposed to a sinner when he began to reap. They don't have a comforter in the hour of reaping. They turn to drugs, alcohol, violence, depression, and sometimes sickness will fall on that person. Now, I told you how Saul planted seeds stoning Christians before he was born again. Now the tables are beginning to turn on Paul. Now that he's a Christian and his name is Paul, his time to reap has come. His harvest is coming up. Acts 14 and 19. Men persuaded the people, and having stoned Paul, drew him out of the city, supposing he had been dead. They thought Paul was dead. They stoned Paul like Paul stoned the Christians when his name was Saul. Now God had a hedge of protection, his angels, his angels around Paul, but Paul will not hedge off. But God will not hedge off your reaping. But he was a comforter once again unto Paul, and saved his life, and gave him the strength to get up and go to Antioch and other cities to continue to preach. Remember, when he was Saul, he bound God's people, casting them in prison. Now he has to reap that harvest. Ain't there something? That very same thing. Acts 16, chapter 19 through verse 23. Paul and Silas was beaten and cast into prison. This is why God is called a deliverer, because the mess we got ourselves in, he will bring us out. They were in prison, but God brought them out in verse 25 at midnight. My God. Paul and Silas prayed and sang. They sang and prayed unto God. Read that in verse 26. Check Acts 16, verse 26. Paul and Silas sang and prayed unto God. And suddenly there was an earthquake. The foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bands were loose. But Paul had to face that very same thing that he had done unto others. So once again, my friend, in Galatians 6 and 7, be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, are you listening? That shall he reap. Notice in that verse, it said, don't you be deceived, or in your thinking. Don't you think because it's you that you will not reap. Don't be deceived because your reaping is not speedily, that it is not coming. Don't be deceived because you are yet in money or in a big house or you are healthy, that your reaping is not coming. It is sure to come, and don't fool yourself. God is no respecter of person. This law of reaping and sowing is for us all. God is not marked. We are not to make fun of God in unbelief, thinking that we will escape the punishment set forth to those that sow to the flesh, or to their wicked works. The good you do will also come back to you. But when you sow goodness, you must do it with the right heart and not to be patted on the back, for all others to look on you as a good person. Cain and Abel gave offerings unto God. God accepted Abel's offering, but God rejected Cain's offering, even though it was a good offering. But Cain had murder in his heart. He premeditated on killing his brother Abel. So God rejected Cain and his offering. Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. You can read that in Genesis 4 and 3. Those that would be gazing on the wayside would have thought this was a good thing of Cain. But God looks on the heart. Man looks on the outer appearance. Everybody see you at church holding your offering up in the air, wanting to be seen and your goodness to be spoken well of. But God looks on that heart, one that gives in public. But back at home, you want